Welcome to Shiro Be Your Own Hero podcast, where we will discover that we can be our own heroes in our lives and that we don't have to always look outside for a mentor and for heroing somebody else. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do, but I'm saying that sometimes it might be better to realize that you can be your own hero in your life because sometimes it's hard to find somebody else who can fulfill that role. And it's also can be very uplifting for you to realize, oh, I've been able to be a hero for myself by loving this unfortunate traumatic event that I went through, whether it was sexual abuse or losing a loved one or losing a friend or having a relationship end or losing your job, that you were able to rise above that incident and be able to strengthen you and to destroy you with your down. And, speaking from personal experience, I've definitely have had some of those experiences in my life. And I have chosen to let them strengthen me. And yes, there have been times where they've broken me down and made it harder for me to live because I've been depressed or I've been more anxious or nervous because of them. But ultimately, I didn't let myself as well in that state of being broken down for a very long time. And I got myself back up by going to therapy and by surrounding myself with very supportive friends and family and those that were able to help me guide me through that journey. And so today's episode will be about the general view of personal things that I've gone through that I consider I've been a hero in my life. And then the next episode will be going into more detail of some of those events and breaking them down into how they have affected and changed my life, and how they have impacted me more today than how they impacted me when I first disclosed about them and when I was first healing from them. Healing was an ongoing process, it doesn't end, unfortunately. And I think that's actually definitely in disguise because in order to heal and let go of something completely, you're going to be living in pain your entire life. And that's something that's really hard. Oh, and also I will want to interview others who have gone through similar experiences, like I mentioned in the beginning of this introduction. So please email me if you want to be interviewed, and you can go into your experience as much as you are comfortable with, and being able to share what you're comfortable with. Because I know sometimes things can be really personal and it can be hard to open about them. So I will leave my email in the podcast description for you if you are interested.
All right. Happy Friday to my listeners. So, as you may know, I've been going through a lot lately with my migraines, and I wanted to do an episode on what it feels like to be a neurotypical or neurodivergent. And speaking from being a neurodivergent, because I don't know what it feels like to be neurotypical. And maybe you feel some of these similar feelings if you're neurotypical too. Anyways, I hope you find some helpful things in this episode today. Excuse me. Do you ever feel invisible because of the learning challenges you have? or because of the emotions you have trouble expressing. Or maybe you feel like no one understands you because it's hard for you to explain what it's like to be you. I'm here to share with you my experiences in these areas and let you know that you are not the only one who has these feelings or emotions. I have and sometimes still feel invisible, especially because my learning challenges aren't obvious all the time. I also feel this way because my chronic migraine condition, especially since I've gotten good at hiding them. I've improved at some of the challenges that I used to experience in social situations, so these aren't obvious anymore. With that being said, there is more I have to work on because I still struggle sometimes with social problems. I struggle when people in my spiritual community comment on my learning disability, which minimizes it. Like when I was trying to explain my challenges with math, they said they have the same even though they're neurotypical. Or like, but you can drive, can't you? Another one is that I'm my mom's daughter. Yes, I have challenges with doing mental math, understanding abstract concepts, and managing my budget. I have to use a calculator to check my math and a pencil and paper to add numbers more quickly. My family helps me understand abstract concepts like math, politics, and managing my finances. I also sometimes feel like a screw up because I have made many mistakes in my life, but I'm starting to realize that everyone makes mistakes and I need to not beat myself up so much because what I need to not beat myself so much when I make mistakes because that doesn't help me or anyone around me. I tend to be too harsh on myself when I make mistakes. I'm trying to remind myself that I'm not the only one who has made that mistake before, which does help because then I know I'm not alone. At least I'm sorry, I need to take some water. I was saying, at least me and my challenges are not invisible or minimized by my family and friends. Also, you're not alone in the challenges that you have in social areas like work, dating, or school. I had many challenges when I was in school because I was still discovering more about myself and LD and how it felt to have it. And I didn't date in college because I wasn't sure I could trust any men outside of my close friends and family because of my childhood trauma. I'm still learning how to date now. And let me rephrase that. I did date a little bit in college, but not really. I only dated one guy, so I'm not really sure that counts. I was working through being homesick and emotions from the two traumas. This is still in college. But I got through it eventually because I would cry while I was running. I didn't care who would see or hear me cry. I was dealing with my migraines too, which was challenging because I didn't know that they were serious until I graduated and they didn't stop. And I had them nonstop in college, except for when I needed to sleep. That's still true sometimes and has been for the last 16 weeks. I need to get rid of them, or at least minimize them somehow, because I'm a completely different person when I have them. I can be very frustrated, agitated, or on edge easily. Okay, enough about me. Let's look at articles from other NVLDers. This quote is from an article about what is neurodiversity and what it feels like to be diagnosed. Here's Wanda Deschamps, who is a founder and principal at Liberty Company and has autism. Quote, I was 46 when I discovered I was autistic. Settling my life made sense. My difficulties fitting in, my problems at work, and my divorce all made sense when at 46 I discovered I had autism. Better late than never. I'm 10 years old, away at my first sleepover camp. The rest of the girls in my cabin are trying to put together a skit for the camp's variety show, and I can see that it isn't going to come together the way they imagine. I have a sixth sense about these things, like I'm the outside looking in when I'm supposed to be part of something. I want to speak up and tell them how to fix it, but I've learned that being a know-it-all does not make me popular. There was always something about me that most people considered different. As a kid, I didn't enjoy sitcoms or skip rope like other girls my age. I wasn't comfortable hugging friends, but I did love listening to discussions about politics. I've always been talkative and inquisitive, which wore out the patience of my friends and sometimes even the adults around me. My grade 4 report summarized my social deficiencies with improvement needs. I stuck out, but I gradually learned to be less conspicuous. It wasn't until I turned 46 that I learned my uniqueness has a name, autism. That was over 3 years ago. My diagnosis was like discovering a piece of my brain, picking it up, putting it in place, and feeling whole for the first time. This was also like receiving the key to unlocking my life and leaving for the first time, according to my values, principles, beliefs, and choices instead of being weighed down by the expectations and assumptions of others. What I've found out since is that there are a significant number of others like me, individuals who weren't identified as having autism until midlife. And for reasons that are still coming to light, many of them are women. Close quote. So even though I don't have autism and I have NLD, I can still relate to that um, article and to Wanda because NLD is similar to autism, and I've worked with individuals who have autism. Excuse me. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is when I found out that I had NLD, it, like Wanda said, it was like, for her, it was like she was finding out a puzzle. She found out the puzzle piece that was missing to her brain, and she was able to put it in and fit it in, and was able to find out more about herself. And for me, it was like a light bulb went off when I found out that I had NLD, and I had so much relief in being able to know why I was so different from everybody else in my family, and being able to know how to better how to help myself and how to have others help me and be able to try to work through the challenges that I have and be able to try to make life easier for me in some ways so that I don't have to struggle through so many of the challenges that I have. And that's what I try to do with this podcast. And to try to talk through the challenges that I have to see if that helps you in some way, whether you have NLD or if you have autism or ADHD or whatever learning challenge you have, or whether you don't have a learning challenge and you are neurotypical, but you have challenges in life that you can relate to in some way. So Just let me get some water and then I'll read the next article to you. So the next article is titled Very Grand Emotions, How Autistics and Neurotypicals Experience Emotions Differently by Tara Vance, written on March 23rd in 2019. Quote, characterizations of autistic people often reflect a profile of a stoic, unfeeling, emotionless autonomon. Many times the only emotion ascribed to autistics, especially by the lay writers who populate the dustbin of Amazon Kindle's self-published section, is explosive anger. This is an accusation which has often been leveled against me, usually much to my confusion. One notable example was a social media post I was tagged into about infant circumcision. The journal article in the post was absolute quack science. It was emotionally manipulative, purposefully misleading, and rife with untruths and ethical violations. So instead of responding to the topic, I talked about the lack of veracity and the void of research ethics from the authors of the journal article. If a debate were happening, my friends deserved to have accurate, factual information to make such a important decision. Immediately, everyone in the discussion assumed I had coldly taken a position in favor of routine infant circumcision. It was intense. I was accused of intellectualizing to preserve a personal preference I hadn't stated or even considered a personal preference of not having a conscience of, in quotes, supporting genital manipulation and other atrocious attributes and thoughts. The more I attempted to reason, the worse the situation became, and the more convinced people were about my terrible personality and empty heart. Explaining was regarded as manipulation, being competitive, and again, having no feelings. I lost friends over that conversation. I didn't realize I was speaking a different language. I didn't realize that my emotional experience was different from theirs. None of us did. This was one of my similar instances in life. I have historically walked away from such situations feeling devastated, angry, confused, and frankly, like everyone else, was delusional. They felt the same way about me. My massive ego is almost always a part of the charges in these discussions, parallel to the narrative that I am emotionless. What most bothered me was that no one was understanding how deeply I did feel. Close quote. I'm just gathering my thoughts about that. So, first of all, sorry about some of that content in there. But I think that's important because it does speak to what Tara was saying in terms of how she didn't realize how the conversation took a bad turn, and then she tried to fix it, and it just went worse, and she tried to quit while she was ahead, and that didn't work for her. And I know for me, I don't remember I was going to try to bring a topic up or a time up when that happened to me in one of my sociology classes in college, and I don't remember enough of it to really speak to it. But all that I do remember is that I didn't really talk about the topic well enough to add to it. And my professor brought that up later in office hours, and he didn't know I had NLD, and I didn't know how to really tell him enough about NLD and why that happened, because sometimes you want to add to the topic or the conversation, but you don't know how to. And you may think you are adding to it, but you're not. And then you realize you're not, and then you just become very quiet. And then when you remember that happening, you're like, I'm just going to stay quiet and I'm going to let everybody else talk. And while that is, helpful for everybody else, it's not helpful for you, because you lose the chance to be able to work on your social cues, and then everybody else doesn't get to hear your thoughts on the topic, whether they're quote unquote right or wrong. Yeah. So the last article is titled Very Grand Emotions, How Autistic and Neurotypicals Experience Emotions Differently, from Psych Central. Quote, the reason is because if someone complimented me on work I was doing, then I would feel they were implying that I was laboring in the interest of self-promotion or validation seeking. These aren't spoken values, but something we feel innately. This is how I labor with other autistics. We correct each other. We offer what expertise and insight we can to sharpen the other's work, to add that volume and clarity to the other's love song. My new friend and I have already joked that we won't be sending each other birthday cards or holiday gifts. We don't ever talk about clothes or the weather, or even ask each other, how was your day? To us, these details are things we will offer up if it's relevant. If the other doesn't address something adequately enough, we tell them directly, I still want to talk about that thing you didn't respond to with enough focus. We do sometimes talk about the family, health, and our personal emotions, those secondary feelings most people experience as primary emotions. Close quote. So, I can definitely relate to that quote, because it's sometimes hard for me to talk about my emotions, because I don't want to talk about them too much in terms of the past, because sometimes I don't know how to turn it off, and sometimes I don't want to talk about them, and other times I do, and that's I know that's contradictory. Sorry, got tongue tied. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I can relate to where they, like the article said, they weren't really addressing the important things of how their day went or the birthday cards, unless they seemed like that was important, because those seemed trivial or small. And yes, those are important, and they're not trivial to some people. And I guess it really depends on how you were brought up, and how you would react to it. And I would say that this does relate to what I was saying earlier in the episode, where everybody who has learning challenges, or if you're neurotypical, we all respond in different ways to situations, and we all will ask questions differently, and we will talk about different things because we're all unique and different. So that's why I picked that one, because it kind of speaks to what these two individuals talk about and how it's different from what most people talk about. So I hope that you were able to get some lessons out of it. Maybe you didn't, I'm not sure. Maybe you will realize you did later. Like I said, I have been dealing with some challenging things recently, so I will be needing to write some scripts this weekend. Otherwise, I will be behind. So, yeah. I hope that you are doing well and that you are being able to use this podcast to help you learn some new things and learn how to, live with life and be able to use it to your advantage and be able to love it, because sometimes it's very challenging. So I'll talk to you next Friday. Bye.
I hope you were able to get some insight and some lessons and messages out of this first episode of Shiro Be Your Own Hero. And I hope that you will be able to use it to help you guide yourself through whatever you might be going through, whether it's challenging for you or maybe you know somebody else who's going through something that's challenging for them, and be able to help them be there and help yourself be there. I look forward to chatting with you next Saturday again about how you can be your own hero.